At exactly 5:23 p.m. local time, an F-16 Fighting Falcon from the legendary 421st Fighter Squadron sliced through the dry coastal winds over Yemen. Its job? Provide top cover for a U.S. Navy task force patrolling the Red Sea. It was supposed to be a quiet sortie, the kind pilots log without ever touching the trigger. But that piece disintegrated in less than a heartbeat. Unbeknownst to the pilot, tucked into a dirt berm outside Al-Hudaydah, a Houthi SA-6 battery had just locked on. Its targeting system screamed to life. A missile launched, detonating the comm with a flash and a roar. It was a 2.8 Mach killer with a 23-kilometer range and one job: hunt down the F-16. The pilot had seconds. Luckily, the F-16 was not flying blind. Mounted on its nose was an N/APG-83 SA radar, its first line of defense. The radar caught the SA-6 launch at 42 kilometers. Instantly, the pilot dove hard, dropping from 30,000 feet to 15,000 in a gut-wrenching descent. Not to flee, but to break the missile's radar lock. The SA-6 is a semi-active radar homing missile. It needs continuous illumination from its ground radar to stay on target. Break the lock and you break the kill chain. But the radar crews on the ground had prepared for this. They adjusted. They re-illuminated. And now, more missiles were in the air. The pilot's dive wasn't enough. 18 seconds to impact. More launches. More trails. The radar was now tracking multiple threats, but with a catch. At extreme off-bore sight angles, the radar's accuracy plunged from 90% to under 50%. The pilot's high G-turns were throwing off both his radar and the enemy's. But it was no guarantee of survival. That's when the next layer kicked in. Attached to each pylon under the wings was a 19-kilogram Terra Pylon Integrated Dispensing System, PIDS, a mouthful of tech with one job: survive the unspeakable. Each PIDS pod was armed with 6 AAR-60V2 ultraviolet missile warning sensors. These little sentinels scanned for launches and rocket motor signatures, giving 360 degrees coverage. The moment they detected the SA-6 closing in, they launched a barrage: 12 MGU-50/B infrared flares and 24 R-180 radar reflective chaff bundles. A half-kilometer cloud of lies bloomed behind the F-16, burning hot and radar loud. But the missiles weren't fooled. With 6 missiles in the air, the final line of defense came online. Slung under the aircraft's belly was a digital guardian, the AN/LQ-184 ECM jamming pod. Tuned across the 2 to 20 GHz range, it began spewing ghost signals and digital noise, flooding the SA-6 radar feed. The result? Chaos. Within seconds, the missile's link to its launch radar collapsed. One by one, the SA-6 lost lock. Their trajectories flattened out. What had been precision strikes became ballistic shots in the dark. 4 missiles screamed past the jet, missing by less than 200 meters, close enough to rock the cockpit with turbulence. The pilot exhaled. He was alive. For now. But this was no isolated incident. The Houthis had just done something unprecedented, fired on a manned U.S. aircraft in broad daylight. And they weren't finished. 44 minutes after the failed F-16 shootdown, at exactly 6:07 p.m. local time, a different aircraft cruised 50 miles northeast of Al-Hudaydah. Silent, steady, unmanned. An MQ-9 Reaper drone, launched from Chabali airfield in Djibouti, patrolled high above Yemeni terrain, its belly full of sensors, its lenses fixed on Houthi convoys resupplying forces near the front. A routine surveillance run. No weapons. No backup. Just a set of eyes in the sky. But down below, the Houthis weren't done. Still smarting from their missed opportunity with the F-16, they pivoted to a softer target. The SA-6 radar blinked awake. Coordinates locked. Launch authorization confirmed. Another missile screamed skyward. This time, the Reaper saw it coming. Buried deep within its airframe was the Pandora Defensive Suite, an automated guardian designed to detect, calculate, and deploy before a human even has time to blink. Within 8 seconds of missile detection, the Pandora Suite kicked into overdrive. The drone climbed hard, banking to rise above 15,000 feet. The maneuver wasn't about altitude, it was about survival. Every aircraft has blind spots. The Reaper's most vulnerable point? A 30-degree cone directly beneath it, the perfect strike angle for a missile like the SA-6. The drone's response was textbook: climb fast, roll out of the cutout zone, and fill the sky with countermeasures. At 15,300 feet, The AN/LE-46 dispenser opened fire, not with bullets, but deception. 8 infrared flares shot out in just 4 seconds, glowing like miniature suns. Alongside them, a storm of radar-reflective chaff blanketed the sky, forming a 300-square-meter ghost field that screamed, "Target," in every direction but the right one. Still, the missile was hungry. The Reaper's system wasn't infinite. Its loadout maxed at 60 MGU, 60/B flares and 120 R, 10 chaff bundles. Enough for 12 engagements per sortie, but if it burned through 75%, the mission was scrubbed. The Reaper would be forced to turn back, leaving its reconnaissance incomplete. It wasn't just about saving the aircraft, it was about maintaining battlefield visibility. Enter the final piece of the puzzle, the AN/69 radar warning receiver. Capable of detecting frequencies from 0.5 to 20 GHz, the system locked onto the SA-6 radar emission like a bloodhound. Its angular resolution? Within 1 degree of accuracy. At 200 kilometers, the Reaper already knew where the threat was before the missile even left the tube. Thanks to this early warning, the countermeasures were deployed with surgical precision, timed not for maximum volume, but maximum confusion. It worked, but not without scars. The SA-6 fragmentation warhead exploded just 100 meters behind the drone. Thousands of tungsten pellets scythed through the air. Most missed, but not all. When the Reaper landed back at base, maintainers counted 6 punctures on the right wing. Shrapnel damage. Non-fatal, but it was close. Too close. What made this strike extraordinary wasn't the damage, it was what it represented. This was the first time the Houthis had targeted both a manned U.S. aircraft and an unmanned one in the same operation. They had escalated. They had drawn blood, even if it was only metal. And the United States was about to answer. The missile attack on the MQ-9 wasn't just a provocation, it was a challenge. And less than 8 hours after the last fragment punched a hole in the Reaper's wing, the U.S. answered with fire. At precisely 3:45 a.m. local time on February 21st, the guided missile destroyer USS Spruance crept into its launch box just off the Yemeni coast. Its orders were classified, encrypted, and chillingly specific: locate and eliminate the SA-6 launcher that had targeted U.S. aircraft. This wasn't just payback. It was precedent. Ordinarily, such a strike would be carried out with a Tomahawk cruise missile, an old warhorse with 1,500 miles of range and a solid reputation for hitting what it's told. But Spruance's combat watchstanders had different orders this time. They were told to use something faster, louder, unignorable. They loaded the SM-6. Designed primarily as an air defense missile, the SM-6 was never meant to hit ground targets, at least not publicly. But in recent years, the U.S. Navy had quietly updated its software and doctrine. What was once an interceptor had become a precision strike weapon. And now, it was about to be used in that role for the very first time, on the world stage. Inside the Spruance, fire control teams raced against the clock. Satellite surveillance showed that the Houthi SA-6 launcher and its IS-91 radar system were still parked near Al Hudaydah. But launchers are mobile. They can vanish into desert roads at 34 miles per hour, and every second mattered. Unlike Tomahawks, SM-6 missiles don't just get coordinates and fly straight. They fly smart. The combat team began uploading complex flight plans, dozens of pre-programmed waypoints. These weren't random. Each was designed to curve, weave, and mask the missile's trajectory, making interception nearly impossible. Then came the command. With a thunderclap and twin plumes of fire, 2 SM-6 erupted from the ship's vertical launch cells. They arced high into the dawn sky, accelerating to Mach 3.5, 4 times faster than the speed of sound. They didn't sing. They screamed. The Houthi air defense network detected them, but too late. Built to intercept slow cruise missiles and drones, the Houthis' radar systems couldn't track a 1,500-pound warhead moving faster than a rifle bullet at 60,000 feet. By the time their screens lit up, the missiles were seconds from impact. At 3:51 a.m., both SM-6 dropped from the sky like thunderbolts. The first slammed into the radar array, shredding its dish, base, and emitter coil in one blast. The second missile came in low, targeting the mobile SA-6 launcher itself. Its 140-pound high-explosive warhead detonated with surgical violence, turning the launcher into a twisted husk of scorched steel and rubber. Post-strike SIGINT confirmed 8 enemy operators killed, including the team that had fired on the F-16 hours earlier. But that wasn't the only message sent. The choice of the SM-6 was deliberate. This wasn't about logistics. It was about language. A Tomahawk would have said response. The SM-6 said retribution. It said, "You aimed at our pilots, we aimed at your radar. You tried to hide behind doctrine, we rewrote it. But the night was far from over. By 6 p.m. local time on February 21st, the gloves were off. The missile attack on the F-16. The shrapnel scars on the MQ-9. The downed SA-6 battery. All of it had built to this moment. And aboard the USS Harry S. Truman, the deck was alive with tension. Below deck, flight crews loaded payloads. Above, pilots double-checked mission briefs that left no room for misunderstanding. Level the enemy's launch infrastructure. No second chances. The Navy had planned for this. They just hadn't expected to greenlight it so soon. In under 20 minutes, the first F/A-18 Super Hornets were in the air, 4 at a time. By 6:20 p.m., they were gone. By 6:35, the next wave was off the deck. By 7:10, another. It didn't stop. Over 5.5 hours, 4 full waves of U.S. carrier-based strike aircraft launched into the dusky Yemeni sky, heading straight for Houthi missile depots, radar bunkers, and hardened infrastructure near Sada and Al-Hudaydah. But this wasn't just another JDAM run. The U.S. brought out something special. Each Hornet was armed with the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, JSOW, a long-range, GPS-guided glide bomb built to wipe out what regular bombs couldn't. Launched from high altitude, it could reach targets over 130 kilometers away, well outside the range of most Houthi air defenses. It didn't dive like a bomb, it soared like a falcon with vengeance in its veins. Each AGM-154 carried one of 2 payloads, a cluster of 145 anti-armor bomblets, or a unitary 192-pound explosive warhead. Both were designed to cripple, not just damage, strategic targets. As the first wave of Hornets neared the strike zone, the AGM-154s dropped away. Silent, graceful, calculated. Then came the thunder. Storage bunkers erupted like volcanoes. Blast waves flattened adjacent compounds. From satellites, the pattern was unmistakable. Dozens of targets, lit up with near-simultaneous precision. Houthi operators who had once aimed radar dishes toward U.S. aircraft now scrambled to hide, to relocate, or to flee. It was too late. And the U.S. wasn't done. As the last strike jets peeled away from their runs, USS Gravely, another Arleigh Burke-class destroyer stationed south of the Red Sea, fired 6 Tomahawk missiles into the still-smoking wreckage. The targets? Any remaining signatures. Heat blooms from undestroyed vehicles. Suspected C-3 bunkers. Secondary ammo stores. What the SOs hadn't crushed, the Tomahawks buried. Over the next 90 minutes, satellites tracked fireballs over 20 separate grid squares. The message was crystal clear. You fired at one of ours. We'll erase 20 of yours. The final damage assessments stunned analysts. 14 KR-M2 ballistic missiles destroyed. 3 additional SF-6 launchers neutralized. 23 anti-ship cruise missiles obliterated. Multiple radar and fire control units leveled. No U.S. casualties. 0 aircraft losses. But even as dust settled and fires smoldered in the desert night, intelligence analysts in Bahrain and Tampa warned, this was not over. Because while this strike decimated key launch points, it didn't touch the stockpiles hidden deeper inland. And it didn't erase the will of a group that had just stood toe-to-toe with American air power and survived long enough to get noticed. There would be another battle, but it would be on different terms. By sunrise on February 22nd, the skies over northern Yemen were quiet, but only in sound. The echoes of the previous night's bombardment still hung in the air like smoke. Dust settled. Satellites scanned. And in Bahrain, Djibouti, and Washington, analysts leaned in closer, tracking what would come next. Because this wasn't just a strike. It was a signal. And everyone was listening. Across the region, U.S. allies nodded. Enemies blinked. And Iran, sitting quietly behind the curtain, watched everything with calculating interest. The SA-6 batteries the Houthis had used weren't scavenged junk. These were modernized launchers, captured from the Yemeni military a decade earlier, upgraded with Iranian radar systems and refitted with domestically modified seekers, a Frankenstein of Cold War Soviet hardware and 21st century Iranian engineering. The Houthis didn't just launch missiles, they demonstrated capability, coordination, confidence, and more than anything, access. The kind of access only Tehran can provide. This time they missed. Next time? Maybe not. That's the strategic fear. Not the missiles themselves, but the learning curve. Because the more the Houthis fire, the better they get at aiming. And the more US jets they target, even if they miss, the more data they send back to their suppliers. What February 21st proved wasn't just American dominance, it revealed vulnerability. Yes, the F-16 survived. Yes, the Reaper completed its mission. Yes, the Houthis paid dearly. But in a war defined by saturation attacks, asymmetric escalation, and proxies willing to burn for headlines, success isn't always measured in targets destroyed. Sometimes, it's in the risks taken. And the fact that they dared to aim at a US manned aircraft in open daylight? That was new. That was different. That was deliberate. In the hours following the strikes, President Trump called the operation a righteous show of force and promised swift retribution against any future aggression. CENTCOM officials confirmed that further deployments of naval assets and Reaper drones were being considered. Carrier strike groups were repositioned. Satellite tasking orders were reprioritized. Rules of engagement? Under review. But beneath all that muscle flexing, planners knew the truth. Deterrence isn't what it used to be. The Houthis still have launchers, stockpiles, advisors. The deserts are vast, the terrain unforgiving, and the support lines shadowy. And the US? It can't strike every truck. It can't jam every signal. It can't intercept every launch. So now, a new doctrine emerges, not just from the ashes of SA-6 batteries, but from the sobering realization that the age of clean superiority is over. We're now in a world where drones bleed, where fighters dodge radar-guided missiles in real time, and where Navy ships use air defense missiles as surgical strike tools. It's a chessboard with 1,000 queens and no rules, where creativity is as deadly as firepower, and where the next battle won't be decided by who has more, but by who dares first. The Houthis dared, and the US replied. But make no mistake, the next move is already being planned. Bye for now.